There are moments in Magic the Gathering history where the game cracked open and spilled pure chaos into the world. Urza's Saga block wasn't just one of those moments. It was the big bang of brokenness, a singularity of bad balance decisions, beautiful design, and breathtaking ambition. Today it's remembered as the most overpowered block ever printed, a storm of combos and fast mana that transformed how the game was played and nearly tore it apart. But what makes Urza's Saga, Urza's Legacy, and Urza's Destiny so fascinating isn't just the bans and the blowback. It's the alchemy of design choices, the lore-rich flavor, and the way it stitched enchantments, artifacts, and storytelling into a sweeping, catastrophic whole. Urza's block wasn't just broken, it was sublime. When the design team first set out to build Urza's Saga, they weren't planning to break standard. They weren't even planning to center the set around artifacts. The original vision was an enchantment block, a thematic and mechanical exploration of lingering magic, curses, blessings, and time-worn power. For example, there were sleeping enchantments, which would awaken under certain conditions. There were also the embraces, each of which turned their wearer into a famous creature: Serra Angel, Zephyrd, Sengir Vampire, and Child of Gaia. The designers leaned into the enchantment theme fairly hard, but branding had other ideas. To align with the story of Urza, the planeswalker, artificer, and obsessive megalomaniac, the set was rebranded as the Artifact Cycle, and much of the enchantment identity was left buried under layers of mechanical excess. What emerged was a set built on two converging ideas: artifacts and cheating on resources. Everything good in Urza's block comes too soon. Everything powerful arrives with too small a price tag. It's a block obsessed with circumventing the natural pace of magic, throwing down mana rocks, free spells, and one-card engines at breakneck speed. Balance was not a priority. Spectacle was. The result was combo winter. If you're a newer player, you might not realize how close Magic came to collapsing in 1999. After Urza's Saga dropped, tournament scenes warped into relentless combo factories. Decks won by turn 3, or even turn 1 if you were lucky enough to draw Memory Jar and a Dark Ritual. There was a joke at the time that, in this meta, the dice roll was the early game, mulligans were the mid-game, and turn 1 was the late game. This wasn't quirky kitchen table fun. This was metagame apocalypse. Control couldn't keep up. Aggro couldn't get a foothold. Mid-range didn't exist. It was a world of Tinkers, Tutors, and Yawgmoth's will, and it was hell for anyone trying to play fair. The DCI responded with a sledgehammer. Mass bannings in Standard and Extended. Cards like Tolarian Academy, Windfall, and Time Spiral got the axe. Memory Jar earned Magic's first ever emergency ban, pulled days after Urza's Legacy went live because it enabled turn 1 kills with grotesque consistency. Wizards CEO Peter Adkison, who was at the time incensed by the backlash, reportedly told R&D that they would all be fired if they ever made a set this broken again. And yet, through all this wreckage, something brilliant glowed. For all the infamy, Urza's block isn't mechanically lazy. On the contrary, it's one of the most inventive, forward-looking blocks of its era. Echo was the flagship mechanic, essentially a 2-turn casting cost. You could drop a creature for cheap, but you'd have to pay its full mana cost again on your next upkeep, or sacrifice it. In Urza's Saga, Echo often attached to oversized bodies, giants and beasts that hit hard if you could afford to pay. Urza's Legacy refined the idea, using Echo mostly on creatures with ETB effects. Avalanche Riders, a land-destroying 2/2 with haste and echo, became a hallmark of red disruption, and the first Magic Invitational card ever designed. But the most dangerous mechanic wasn't keyworded at all. It was what we now call the free spell mechanic. Cards that untap lands as parts of their effect. Frantic Search, Snap, Time Spiral, these weren't just value cards, they were accelerants. They let you cast spells, refill your mana, and then do it all again. Combined with Tolarian Academy or High Tide, the results were explosive. These cards aren't elegant, they're not even remotely balanced, but they are unforgettable. If one card could serve as the avatar for everything that went wrong in this block, it's Yawgmoth's Will. 1 sorcery, 3 mana, and a lifetime ban from Fair Magic. To cast Yawgmoth's Will is to time travel. You get 1 turn where every card in your graveyard is playable again. Lands, spells, everything. If you had mana and a stocked graveyard, Yawgmoth's Will wasn't just a second chance, it was your second hand. Since then, Magic has designed much weaker versions of similar ideas, like Past in Flames and Underworld Breach, both of which saw a ton of competitive play, and the latter of which was recently banned in Modern. Mark Rosewater, in hindsight, called Yawgmoth's Will one of the most embarrassing mistakes in card design history, because R&D should have known better. The card is still banned or restricted in pretty much every format, but it's also a fan favorite, a cult classic of degeneracy, and a beautiful example of just how much power can hide in a clean line of rules text. Of all the cards in Urza block to receive bans, none were as infamous or as swift as Memory Jar. Printed in Urza's Legacy, Memory Jar offered a bizarre wheel effect. Each player exiled their hand, drew 7 new cards, and then, at end of turn, returned their old hand and discarded the new one. Within days of its legality, combo decks brewed around Jar and Megrim, creating turn 1 kill loops using rituals, draw spells, and graveyard recursion. The results weren't just theoretical, they were tournament tested. The DCI banned Memory Jar in record time, mere days after the set's release. This was Magic's first emergency ban, a sharp signal that something had gone terribly wrong. Memory Jar remains banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage. It's a masterclass in how a single artifact, priced just right and timed just wrong, can warp an entire metagame. And it's a reminder that sometimes R&D miscalculates not just the power of the card, but the speed at which players will exploit it. But Urza block didn't just break the game. It also left behind some of the most intriguing cycles ever made. In Urza's Legacy, 5 uncommon lands each tapped for a colored mana and could animate into a creature. Treetop Village, Fairy Conclave, Spawning Pool, Gitu Encampment, and Forbidding Watchtower. Their design has been iterated on countless times since, and manlands are now a fixture of the game. In a block known for doing too much, these cards did just enough. There were other cycles too, each one reflecting a thematic vision. These included recurring auras like Rancor, which bounced back to your hand when they hit the graveyard. Lobotomy style spells in Urza's Destiny that exiled a target permanent and all its copies from its controller's hand, graveyard, and library. The Scents and Seers, color reveal spells and creatures that scaled based on cards in hand. rewarding tight monocolor builds. And finally, the growing enchantments, cards that gained counters and got stronger each turn, reflecting the long game design space so often lost in the race to combo. In a block this reckless, these cycles were islands of balance and intention, proof that R&D hadn't lost their minds entirely, just mostly. That said, the block also contains perhaps the most broken cycle in all of Magic. These were the legendary lands, the most infamous of which was Tolarian Academy. It tapped to produce 1 blue for each artifact you control. White got Serra's Sanctum, which did the same for enchantments, and green got Gaia's Cradle, which produced 1 green for each of your creatures. Many players may not realize that red and black also got legendary lands in the form of Phyrexian Tower and Shivan Gorge, though they deviated from the card type ramp idea. The Urza block didn't just break the rules mechanically, it also pushed Magic's storytelling into new territory. Set across Dominaria in the shadow of the Phyrexian threat, this block chronicled Urza's obsessive efforts to build the ultimate defense against invasion. With his Silver Golem Khan and his brilliant student Joyra, Urza scoured the Thran mana rig and reshaped the world's magic into weapons and engines. Urza's legacy deepened this arc, showing Phyrexian forces encroaching on the Tolarian Academy itself, forcing characters like Baron, Rain, and Teferi into action. Urza's destiny took things even darker. With the skyship Weatherlight completed, Urza turned his focus toward eugenics and breeding programs, hoping to engineer the perfect crew and the perfect soldiers. His geneticist Gatha defected, enhancing the brutal Keldon race. Meanwhile, Yawgmoth created the artificial plane of Wrath as a staging ground for war. It was Magic's most ambitious saga yet, a story of hubris, science, sacrifice, and the slow collapse of hope. The Artifact Cycle novels, while uneven in tone, remain foundational to Magic lore, and the cards themselves reflect that tragic grandeur. Khan Silver Golem, Serra Avatar, Replenish, Treachery, Opposition, Yawgmoth's Bargain. For all its explosiveness, Urza block didn't rely solely on brute power. It also experimented, with mechanics that didn't break the game, but pushed its expressive capacity. In addition to Echo, there was cycling, and a near mechanic Mark Rosewater once called cycling from play. Introduced to help prevent dead draws, the Urza block cycling cards let you pay 2 and discard a card to draw a new one. Urza's Destiny explored what could happen if you could cycle cards from the battlefield. Creatures like Brass Secretary and Yavimaya Elder could be sacrificed for cards, mimicking the feel of cycling, but only once they had outlived their usefulness. These cycling from play effects were fair but overlooked. Rosewater later admitted that he regretted not labeling them as cycling variants. Players didn't connect the dots, and so the mechanic died quickly. But the idea, cards that trade one form of utility for another, remains a key piece of Magic design. Now let's talk about the royalty. Some cards from Urza block are infamous, others are just iconic, not because they broke the game, but because they defined it. Rancor gave green its most enduring aura, cheap, aggressive, and unkillable. It's still played today and was never meant to cost just 1 mana. Mother of Runes became the 1-drop to beat, granting protection at instant speed and demanding removal on sight. Elvish Piper gave casual players their dream engine: put any creature onto the battlefield. A Timmy card in its purest form. Deranged Hermit brought with it a squirrel swarm, and was the first card involving squirrels to see actual competitive play. Opposition allowed you to lock down an opponent's board if you had enough creatures, turning Magic into a game of suffocation. Phyrexian Negator was inspired by Juzam Jin, an earlier black creature that was a 5/5 for 4 mana that dealt 1 damage to you each turn. The card designers wanted to push the stats, making the Negator a 5/5 trampler for just 3, but they compensated by having you sacrifice a permanent for each 1 damage dealt to it. Despite this hefty drawback, Phyrexian Negator became a tournament all-star, and later inspired Phyrexian Obliterator. Urza block is also notable for featuring the first card for Teferi. He's referenced by name in the flavor text for Disruptive Student. The block also produced the sideboard staple Defense Grid, a potent tool against counterspells and interaction. Then there's the discard spell Duress, a marvelously clean design that has since been reprinted countless times. In terms of combo shenanigans and other degeneracy, Red got Goblin Welder, able to exchange an artifact on the battlefield with one in the graveyard, while Green got Priest of Titania, one of the strongest tribal ramp effects ever printed. The block's enchantment theme got perhaps its strongest payoff of all in Opalescence, which turns all enchantments into creatures with power and toughness equal to their mana value. A card that would synergize powerfully with the ley lines many years later. Then there were the truly crazy cards. Tinker, whose pay 3 mana, sack a cheap artifact, get your win condition clause, made it Legacy banned, Commander banned, and Vintage restricted. Palinchron, which when paired with High Tide or Gauntlet of Power, could loop into infinite mana and infinite misery. Metalworker, a card that turns a handful of artifacts into a flood of mana, earning it a spot on multiple ban lists for multiple years. Academy Rector, who dies and tutors directly into enchantment-based combo wins, especially when paired with Replenish or Opalescence. Each of these cards didn't just appear, they shaped formats, they defined decks, they forced the rules themselves to change, and for a while they kind of broke the game. Let's not sugarcoat it. The aftermath of the Urza block was catastrophic for organized Magic. The core mistake wasn't any single card, it was a design philosophy. Urza block tried to do everything at once. Reward spellcasting, push artifacts, empower enchantments, support combo, make creature combat relevant, and tell a sweeping story. In doing so, it overwrote the boundaries of balance. Some mechanics, like the free spells that untapped lands equal to their mana cost, such as Frantic Search and Time Spiral, were fundamentally unfixable. As Rosewater admitted, the higher their cost, the better they became. That breaks all conventional card design wisdom. The takeaway is that not all ideas can be balanced. Power level aside, one overlooked legacy of the Urza block lies in its visual and narrative design, which marked a subtle but important turning point for Magic. This was the era when the game started looking sharper, more polished, more unified, and more ambitious in how it visually conveyed its themes. The block's card frame still bore the old school look, but its art direction was modernizing rapidly. For the first time, artists were being asked to reflect not just individual card concepts, but a cohesive narrative tone, one that spanned all 3 sets. The sets also introduced colored frames for monocolored non-basic lands, a visual tweak that seems minor but marked the beginning of an ongoing evolution in card clarity and design polish. Urza's legacy also ushered in one of Magic's most significant production changes, the random insertion of foil cards. This wasn't just a gimmick, but the start of Magic's chase card economy and a new level of collectability. Players cracking shiny memory jars or foil rankers experienced a new kind of thrill, one that would go on to shape Magic's pack opening psychology forever. And beyond the cards themselves, the Urza block was one of the first to have its story deeply intertwined with both a published novel cycle and a cohesive promotional push. Characters like Teferi, Joyra, and Multani weren't just names on flavor text. They were fully fleshed out players in serialized fiction, paving the way for the lore-driven storytelling model that would become core to the game's identity in the years ahead. If Weatherlight was the narrative prototype, Urza block was the world tour, fusing mechanics, marketing, art, and story into something bigger than the sum of its parts. Even as the block cracked formats in half, it was also welding Magic together, transforming it from a glorified math puzzle into a full-blown mythos. Broken, yes, but visionary too. In the end, Urza block is a contradiction, a disaster and a masterpiece. Yes, it forced sweeping bans. Yes, it gave birth to Combo Winter. But it also gave Magic its modern imagination, its willingness to take risks, and its capacity for drama. It gave us cards we still talk about 25 years later. It tested what a card game could be. It proved that power in the hands of artists and designers isn't just a danger, but a tool. One that when wielded recklessly can destroy, but when wielded well can create memories, stories, culture. The Urza block was Magic's Icarus moment. It flew too close to the sun, melted the tournament scene, and changed the rules forever. So here's to Yawgmoth's will, Tinker and Tolarian Academy, to Mother of Runes, Rancor, and Opposition, to every card that bent the rules, broke a format, or inspired a pet deck. All of them helped make the game what it is today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and consider joining my Patreon, and I'll see you next time.